Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the true scary stories. The hissing shadow. It started as a small, almost unnoticeable quirk. My cat, Batet, would sit in the corner of my bedroom, her amber eyes fixated on the same spot every evening. At first, I thought she was chasing a bug or maybe just playing a game in her mind. But soon, I noticed a pattern. Each night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she would settle into that same corner, staring intently into what seemed like nothing. Her ears would twitch, and then, like clockwork, she'd hiss, her fur standing on end as if she was seeing something only she could perceive. The corner itself was unremarkable, a simple, shadowed nook between my wardrobe and the wall. It was the kind of space that collects dust, where nothing should be, yet Bastet's reaction made it feel as though it harbored something much darker. I tried brushing it off. After all, cats are known for their strange behaviors. But the unease lingered in my chest, like a cold, heavy stone that wouldn't go away. I began avoiding the corner, steering clear of it even in broad daylight. I knew it was ridiculous, yet something in the back of my mind, some primal instinct, warned me that there was more to Bastet's behavior. The tension grew with each passing night, the hissing becoming more aggressive, more desperate. I tried reasoning with myself, there's nothing there. It's just shadows and silence. But the silence itself started to feel oppressive, as if it was hiding something, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true form. One night, after an especially long day, I collapsed into bed, drained and desperate for sleep. Batet was already in her usual spot, eyes locked on that corner, her low growl vibrating through the room. I buried myself under the covers, trying to ignore her. But as the darkness in my room deepened, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not just by Batet, but by something else, something unseen. My skin prickled with the sensation of invisible eyes tracing every movement, every breath I took. Then, as if in a nightmare, I heard it, a sound so faint at first that I thought I was imagining it. A low, guttural hiss. But it wasn't Batet. No, this sound was deeper, more resonant, as if it came from something ancient, something not of this world. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat up, my eyes locked on the corner where Batet was now crouched, her body tense and trembling. The hiss came again, louder this time, almost mocking. My breath hitched as I forced myself to move closer, the logical part of my brain screaming that I was being absurd, that there was nothing there. But as I reached the corner, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to pulse with life. I reached out a trembling hand, expecting to feel the smooth, cool surface of the wall, but my fingers met something different, something warm and almost fleshy, as if the shadows themselves had taken form. I stumbled back, my heart slamming against my ribs as I stared in horror at the corner. The shadows seemed to twist and writhe, and then I saw it, a pair of eyes, glowing faintly within the darkness. They were watching me, full of malevolent intent. Batet hissed again, louder, more frantically, but this time, the hiss that followed wasn't just an echo. It was a response. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. I froze, my eyes locked on those glowing orbs in the corner, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. The hiss, that ghastly, serpentine sound, still echoed in my ears, reverberating through the very walls of my bedroom. It took every ounce of willpower I had to tear my gaze away, and when I did, I bolted out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me as if that flimsy barrier could keep whatever was in there from reaching me. My mind raced as I stumbled into the living room, my breath coming in ragged gasps. What had I touched? What had I seen? There was no logical explanation for it, no way to rationalize the warmth of that shadow or the sinister glow of those eyes. My thoughts spiraled into panic, each possibility more horrifying than the last. I knew I should leave, get out of the house, but a stronger force kept me rooted to the spot, a morbid curiosity mixed with fear that something far worse would follow if I dared to abandon Batet. The silence in the house was oppressive, broken only by the frantic pounding of my heart. I tried to calm myself, telling myself that I was overreacting, that it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. But deep down, I knew better. That thing in the corner was real, and it was something far beyond my understanding. Minutes felt like hours as I stood there, staring at the closed door of my bedroom. The air around me seemed to grow colder, the darkness in the house thickening like a living thing. I could almost hear it breathing, a slow, deliberate rhythm that matched the chill crawling up my spine. Bastette's hisses still echoed in my memory, her terror a stark contrast to her usually calm demeanor. My cat was trying to protect me from something she could see, something I was foolishly ignoring. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. I had to know what was happening. I crept back to the bedroom door, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. I hesitated, fear clawing at my gut, but the thought of leaving Bastet alone with whatever was in there propelled me forward. I slowly turned the knob and pushed the door open, the hinges creaking like a warning. The room was unnervingly quiet. Bastet was no longer in the corner. Instead, she was perched on the edge of the bed, her eyes still locked on that cursed spot. The glowing eyes were gone, but the shadows seemed thicker, more alive, as if they were aware of my presence. I forced myself to step inside, the cold air biting at my skin as I moved closer to Bastet. "Bastet?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She didn't turn to look at me, her attention still fixated on the corner. I followed her gaze, and though I didn't see the eyes, I felt something watching me, a presence so malevolent it made my blood run cold. My body screamed at me to run, to get as far away from that corner as possible, but I was rooted to the spot, unable to tear myself away. Then, just as I thought I might collapse from the sheer terror of it all, I heard something, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. At first, I thought it was just the blood rushing in my ears, but then it grew louder, more distinct. It was a whisper, so low that I had to strain to hear it, but unmistakably there. The words were garbled, ancient, as if they were being spoken through a mouth that hadn't used language in centuries. But the intent behind them was clear. It was calling to me, beckoning me to come closer. I stepped back, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a haunting, this was something far worse, something that could manipulate the very fabric of reality. My fear intensified as the whispering grew louder, the words more distinct, yet still incomprehensible. They filled the room, seeping into my mind, twisting my thoughts into a tangle of dread and confusion. The corner seemed to stretch, the shadows expanding like a mouth opening to swallow me whole. I felt myself being drawn in, the room around me warping as the darkness in the corner deepened. Bastet hissed again, louder than ever, and the whispering stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so profound it felt like the world had ended. But before I could react, before I could even process what was happening, the corner itself seemed to lurch forward, the darkness spilling out like ink. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't just watching me. It was coming for me. I stumbled back as the darkness from the corner poured out like a living entity, flowing toward me with unnatural speed. Bastet leaped from the bed, her eyes wide with terror, and bolted out of the room, leaving me alone to face whatever was coming. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating, as if the shadows themselves were closing in, pressing against my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee the house and never look back, but my feet wouldn't obey. It was as if the darkness had rooted me to the spot, holding me in place with an unseen force. I could feel it now, not just in my mind, but physically, an overwhelming sense of malevolence that clung to my skin, seeping into my very bones. My thoughts were jumbled, panic rising as I tried to comprehend what was happening. This was no ordinary haunting, this was something ancient, something that had been waiting, lurking in that corner for who knows how long. The shadows coalesced in front of me, forming a vaguely humanoid shape, but there was nothing human about it. It was as if the darkness itself had taken on a physical form, its edges shifting and writhing like a mass of snakes. The glowing eyes reappeared, more distinct now, burning with an eerie, unholy light that seemed to pierce through my soul. The hissing returned, but this time it was accompanied by a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the air, making my heart pound in my chest. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was dry, paralyzed by fear as the creature inched closer. It moved with an unnatural grace, as if it was gliding rather than walking, the shadows swirling around it like a living cloak. The room seemed to bend around it, the walls and ceiling warping as it approached, distorting my perception of reality. It was as if the creature was pulling me into its world, a realm where darkness was alive, and the light could never reach. What are you? I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The creature paused, its head tilting slightly as if considering my question. Then, without warning, it spoke, its voice a rasping, sibilant whisper that echoed inside my mind rather than my ears. "I am hunger," it hissed, the word dragging out like the final breath of a dying man. "I am the void, the nameless dark. I am what you fear, what you hide from in the night." My blood ran cold as the words slithered through my mind, carrying with them a sense of overwhelming dread. This wasn't just a ghost or a demon, it was something far older, something that existed beyond the boundaries of our world. It was the embodiment of the darkness itself, a force that fed on fear, on the terror that gripped my heart and twisted my thoughts into madness. The creature moved closer, its form shifting and flickering as if it could barely contain its own existence. I could feel it reaching out to me, its presence wrapping around me like a shroud, pulling me deeper into the abyss. The hissing grew louder, more insistent, as if it was savoring the fear that radiated off me in waves. I wanted to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness was everywhere, pressing in on me from all sides, suffocating, overwhelming. "Leave me alone!" I screamed, finally finding my voice, though it was ragged with desperation. The creature paused again, its glowing eyes narrowing as if it was amused by my feeble attempt at defiance. "There is no escape," it whispered, its voice dripping with malice. "You invited me, with your fear, your doubt, your darkness. Now, I am here, and I will not leave." It lunged at me, the shadows enveloping me completely. I felt a cold, clammy sensation, as if 1,000 icy fingers were gripping my skin, pulling me into the void. My vision blurred, the world around me fading as the darkness consumed me, swallowing me whole. The last thing I saw before everything went black was those glowing eyes, staring into my soul, claiming me as their own. I awoke to darkness, the kind that presses against your eyes even when they're open. The air was thick, stifling, and I could feel the weight of the void around me, its presence an almost physical force. My body felt heavy, sluggish, as if the shadows had seeped into my muscles, slowing my every movement. Panic surged through me as I tried to make sense of where I was, or if I was even still in my world. There was no sound, not even the faint hum of electricity or the creak of settling wood. It was as if I had been submerged in an ocean of nothingness, where light and sound couldn't penetrate. But the cold, clammy touch on my skin was all too real, and I knew I wasn't alone. The creature was here, somewhere, lurking in the darkness, waiting for me to make a move. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath me. I reached out blindly, searching for anything solid, anything familiar, but my hands found only the thick, viscous air. The space around me seemed infinite, stretching out into an abyss with no walls, no floor, no ceiling. My mind reeled as I struggled to comprehend the impossible, to understand how I had been transported to this nightmare realm. Where am I? My voice came out as a broken whisper, swallowed by the oppressive silence. But there was no response, only the sensation of being watched, of something circling just beyond my perception. I could feel it in the way the air shifted, in the way my skin prickled with dread. The creature was here, just out of sight, waiting for me to fall deeper into despair. I began to walk, each step feeling like I was wading through molasses, the darkness clinging to me, pulling me back with every movement. The cold seeped into my bones, a deep, biting chill that made my teeth chatter and my fingers numb. The fear gnawed at me, whispering in my ear that there was no way out, that I was trapped in this void forever, a prisoner of the darkness. Time lost all meaning as I wandered, my mind fraying at the edges with each step. I didn't know how long I had been walking, minutes, hours, days, but it felt like an eternity. The oppressive silence was maddening, filling my head with whispers of doubt and despair. I thought of Batet, wondering if she was safe, if she even existed anymore, or if she had been swallowed by this void like I had. The thought of her alone, scared, in that world without me tore at my heart, but I was powerless to help her. just as I felt I couldn't take another step, I saw it, a faint, almost imperceptible light in the distance. Hope flared in my chest, and I began to move faster, pushing through the thick air with renewed determination. The light grew brighter as I approached, a small, flickering beacon in the endless night. But with every step closer, the whispers in my mind grew louder, more frantic, warning me to turn back, to stay in the darkness where I belonged. Ignoring the whispers, I reached the light, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and terror. It was a small, floating orb, no bigger than a candle flame, but its glow was warm, comforting. I reached out to touch it, desperate for the warmth, the light, anything to prove that I was still alive, still real. But as my fingers brushed against it, the light flared, and a voice echoed through the void, low and resonant, the same voice that had hissed at me from the shadows. "You cannot escape," it said, the words vibrating through the very fabric of the darkness. The light dimmed, and I saw them, thousands of glowing eyes staring at me from the void, their malevolent gaze burning into my soul. "You are mine now, part of the void, part of the endless night." The darkness surged around me, pulling me under, the coldness biting deeper into my flesh. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the void, lost in the endless expanse of nothingness. The last thing I felt was the icy grip of the creature closing around my heart, pulling me down into the abyss where the light would never reach, where I would be lost forever, another soul claimed by the hissing shadow. And in the real world, in the corner of my room, Batet still hissed, her eyes locked on the spot where the darkness now resided, a darkness that had once been me. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. The Weeping Portrait. When I first stepped into the old house, a shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't just the bitter chill of the autumn air that crept through the broken windows, it was something more profound, something unseen. The house belonged to my late Aunt Sylvia, a woman of many secrets and few visitors. I hadn't been here since I was a child, and now, as her only living relative, I was here to sort through her belongings. My plan was simple: get in, pack what was valuable, and leave. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I knew things wouldn't be so straightforward. The first thing that caught my eye was the large family portrait hanging in the foyer. It was as if time had preserved it better than the rest of the house, which was now a ruin of creaking floorboards and peeling wallpaper. The painting depicted my aunt, her husband, and their 2 children, all smiling as if they had everything they ever wanted. But something about those smiles felt off. They were too wide, too forced, in their eyes. There was something unsettling in their eyes, a glint of mischief that sent another shiver down my spine. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the portrait. The longer I stared, the more I felt as though the figures in the painting were watching me, scrutinizing my every move. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to my anxiety about being in such an eerie place alone. But the feeling lingered, and I noticed something strange. During the day, the portrait seemed almost pleasant, the faces of my relatives beaming down at me. But as evening fell, their expressions began to change. The smiles faded into thin-lipped grimaces, and their eyes seemed to darken, becoming voids of shadow. I decided to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. I went about my task, moving through the house, sorting through the dusty remnants of a life long gone. But as night approached, the atmosphere in the house grew thicker, more oppressive. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in on me, suffocating me with their silence. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old wood, made my heart race. And then, as I passed through the foyer once more, I saw it. The figures in the portrait, they were crying. It wasn't tears that flowed from their eyes, but thick, crimson blood. The sight stopped me in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. I blinked, hoping that when I opened my eyes again, the horrific vision would be gone. But it wasn't. The blood continued to seep from their eyes, staining their faces and dripping down the canvas. A sense of dread washed over me, cold and paralyzing. I wanted to run, to leave the house and never look back, but I was rooted to the spot, unable to tear my gaze away from the grotesque sight before me. The house had more secrets than I could have imagined, and now, I was trapped within its grip. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, the image of that portrait bled into my mind. The blood, those eyes, so full of anguish, as if they were trying to warn me, or perhaps curse me. I lay in bed, wrapped in the musty old blankets that smelled of decay, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house as it groaned and settled around me. The darkness felt alive, pressing in on me from all sides, and I swear I could hear the faintest whispers weaving through the walls. At first, I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe the old pipes rattling deep within the house. But the more I listened, the more distinct the voices became. They weren't the usual creaks and groans of an old house. No, they were deliberate, hushed murmurs, as if someone, or something, was just beyond the walls, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I tried to block it out, pulling the blankets over my head, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they became impossible to ignore. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw off the blankets and stumbled out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The air in the room was thick, almost suffocating, and I felt an inexplicable urge to leave, to get out before something terrible happened. I grabbed my phone, the only source of light, and crept out of the bedroom, the faint glow casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The whispers followed me as I moved through the house, growing more frantic, more desperate. I found myself back in the foyer, standing before the portrait once more. The blood was gone, and the faces in the painting were back to their earlier, unnerving smiles. But I knew what I had seen. It wasn't a hallucination, it was real. My aunt had always been secretive, her life shrouded in mystery. There were rumors about her, whispers in town about strange rituals and curses, but I had never believed any of it. Now, I wasn't so sure. As I stood there, staring at the portrait, the air around me seemed to hum with a dark energy, and the whispers grew louder until they were a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, overlapping, drowning each other out. I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold as ice. I spun around, expecting to see someone there, but there was nothing. Just empty space. The touch lingered, though, a phantom sensation that made my skin crawl. And then I heard it, a single, clear voice breaking through the din of whispers. "Help us," it said, the words echoing through the halls. It was a child's voice, small and frightened, and it sent a chill down my spine. I knew, in that moment, that something terrible had happened in this house. Something involving my aunt and her family, something that had trapped them here, in this place, unable to move on. And now, whatever curse had befallen them was reaching out to me, drawing me into its twisted web. I needed to leave, to get out before it was too late. But as I turned to go, the door to the foyer slammed shut with a deafening crash, and the whispers stopped, leaving a suffocating silence in their wake. I was trapped. The silence was worse than the whispers. It filled the house like a living thing, heavy and malevolent, pressing down on me from every direction. My breath came in shallow gasps as I tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself had decided I wasn't leaving. My heart pounded in my ears, and I fought the rising tide of panic that threatened to overwhelm me. I needed to stay calm, to think clearly, but the cold grip of fear was tightening around my chest. My thoughts raced back to Aunt Sylvia and the strange stories that surrounded her. She had always been an enigma, distant, withdrawn, her eyes shadowed by a life that none of us understood. The townspeople whispered about her late-night gatherings, the strange symbols she painted on the walls, and the eerie way the family portrait seemed to be the centerpiece of it all. My mother had always dismissed the rumors, calling them superstitions of small-minded people. But now, standing in that cursed house, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. I turned back to the portrait, dreading what I might see. The smiles were gone, replaced by expressions of sheer terror. The family's eyes, wide and pleading, seemed to follow me as I moved. But worse than that, much worse, was the fact that the blood was back, streaming down their faces, soaking the canvas. I recoiled, a scream catching in my throat, and backed away, my hand fumbling for something to hold on to. The whispers returned, louder now, more desperate, as if they were trying to warn me, or perhaps drive me mad. In a desperate bid to make sense of it all, I began tearing through the house, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. The whispers followed me as I moved from room to room, each one more decrepit and decayed than the last. Old books lined the shelves, their pages yellowed with age, but none of them offered any answers. I rifled through drawers, pulled open cabinets, all in vain. And then I found it, a small, locked chest hidden away in the back of a closet, almost as if someone had tried to keep it secret. My hands shook as I forced the lock open, my breath hitching in my throat. Inside was a collection of old papers, photographs, and a journal bound in cracked leather. The journal was Sylvia's, the pages filled with her elegant, looping script. I flipped through it, my eyes scanning the entries, and what I read chilled me to the bone. Sylvia had dabbled in things far darker than I could have ever imagined, ancient rituals, invocations, and curses. The family portrait, it seemed, was the key to it all. The journal detailed how Sylvia had made a pact with something unspeakable, something from beyond the veil of our world. She had bound her family to that portrait, trapping their souls within it, all in a twisted attempt to achieve immortality. But something had gone horribly wrong. Instead of eternal life, she had condemned them to an existence of eternal suffering, their souls imprisoned in the painting, forced to watch as the years passed by, unable to rest, unable to escape. As I read, the whispers grew louder, more frantic, and I understood. They were begging for release, for an end to their torment. But how could I possibly help them? The journal offered no solutions, only regret and madness. And then, as if in response to my thoughts, the voice returned, the same childlike voice from before, trembling with fear. "Find the key," it whispered, "break the seal." I didn't know what the key was, but I knew I had to try. The lives, or rather, the souls, of my aunt's family depended on it. But as I clutched the journal to my chest, I heard something else, something that turned my blood to ice. A low, guttural growl echoed through the house, a sound not of this world, a sound of something far more malevolent than restless spirits. I wasn't alone. My heart pounded like a drum as the growl reverberated through the house, a sound so unnatural it twisted my insides with fear. I backed away from the chest, the journal slipping from my trembling fingers. The realization that something else was in the house with me, something far worse than the ghosts of my aunt's family, made my skin crawl. I could feel it, the presence, lurking in the shadows, watching me with unseen eyes. I had to find the key, and I had to find it fast. But I had no idea where to start. My mind raced, trying to piece together the cryptic clues from the journal. "Break the seal," the voice had said, but what did that mean? I looked around the room, scanning the walls, the floors, anything that might offer a hint. And then it hit me, the portrait. The family portrait was the seal, the binding that held them captive. But what was the key? I forced myself to move, inching toward the foyer where the portrait hung, its sinister presence looming like a dark cloud. The growl echoed again, this time closer, and I could hear footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming up from the basement. Whatever it was coming for me. My hands shook as I reached the portrait, the figures in the painting now barely recognizable, their faces contorted in agony, their eyes hollow and bloodshot. My eyes darted over the canvas, searching for something, anything that could be the key. And then I saw it, a tiny symbol painted in the corner of the frame, barely visible under layers of dust and grime. It was an ancient sigil, one that matched the drawings in Sylvia's journal. This had to be it. My fingers traced the symbol, and as I did, I felt a slight warmth emanating from the frame. It was as if the portrait was alive, reacting to my touch. But before I could act, a deafening crash came from behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat as the thing from the basement emerged from the shadows. It was monstrous, its form shifting and writhing like a mass of darkness given shape. Eyes, dozens of them, glinted in the dim light, all fixed on me with a hunger that was beyond comprehension. The growl deepened, rumbling through the air like thunder, and the creature began to move toward me, slow and deliberate, savoring the terror that gripped me. I had seconds, maybe less. My hand reached into my pocket, fumbling for something, anything, I could use. My fingers closed around the small, rusted knife I had found in the chest. Without thinking, I slashed at the symbol on the portrait's frame. As the blade connected with the wood, a sharp, piercing scream filled the air, not from the creature, but from the painting itself. The figures in the portrait convulsed, their bodies writhing in agony as the canvas began to tear itself apart, the seal breaking before my eyes. The creature recoiled, its growl turning into a shriek of rage as the portrait disintegrated, the fragments of canvas swirling in the air like ashes. The house shook violently, and I was thrown to the floor, the journal flying from my grip. The darkness around me thickened, and I could feel the creature's rage, its fury at being denied its prize. But then, as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The creature let out one final, ear-splitting scream before dissolving into the shadows, leaving me alone in the ruins of the foyer. I lay there, gasping for breath, the silence pressing in on me like a heavy weight. The portrait was gone, the curse broken, and with it, the spirits of my aunt's family were finally free. But as I slowly pulled myself to my feet, I realized the horror was far from over. The journal had been right, Sylvia had made a pact, but it wasn't just her family that had paid the price. The final entry in her journal flashed through my mind: the key must be hidden, for if the seal is broken, the darkness will find another home. I felt a chill run down my spine as I glanced at the shadows that still clung to the corners of the room. The creature might have been banished, but the darkness, the curse, was still here, waiting, watching. And I knew, deep in my bones, that it was only a matter of time before it found its next victim. As I stood there, in the eerie silence of the ruined house, I could have sworn I heard a faint, mocking whisper. The house wasn't done with me yet. The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.